Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the More Life Podcast. This week, I'm here with Mr. Brady Shearer in the building, creator of Nucleus and Pro-Church Tools, helping churches navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. First off, thanks for being here, man. Say what's up to everybody and maybe elaborate on what that means, the biggest communication shift in 500 years, just as some people might not be as familiar with what that whole idea, can be or mean.
Yeah, sure thing. Glad to be here, Bart. Appreciate the invitation. Always great to connect. So the biggest communication shift in 500 years refers to the printing press, that being the 500-year-ago communication shift. And it basically is just a pithy way of acknowledging that we're living through one of the greatest shifts in communication and technology in the history of humankind. The last one being the printing press, when the written word became available to everyone, and that drastically changed the face of the Western world and eventually the entire world with what it allowed. And for churches in particular, that printing press meant that every person could have a Bible, and you didn't have to go to your local priest or pastor and have them disseminate the word. You could read it for yourself. And nowadays, what it means is that you don't maybe get stuck in your Christian bubble. You are exposed to many more worldviews, which can be both challenging and rewarding. And then for churches, it gives them the ability to connect with people and affect life change, not just on Sunday mornings, let's say, at an in-person gathering, but in the, what we say, 167 hours beyond that Sunday morning service. And there's just so much opportunity there that's ripe for the taking. So that's the big idea behind what we do. Our primary product is a software platform called Nucleus. And so we have several thousand churches that are on paid subscriptions on that platform. It's a website builder, allows churches to accept donations online, social media subscriptions, so there's content that you can download, and much more beyond that. But that's kind of a quick summary of what we do and why we do it.
That's awesome. I love the whole idea that you guys went with the biggest shift in 500 years. And I feel like I've been following you for long enough to actually, almost rhyme that off, like that democratization of information, like it's accessible for everybody. And what does that mean for people who are trying to, like in your own words, navigate, how do I do this here and now? Like I said, I've seen you appear in other podcasts. I've seen you on social media a bunch. You have a good following there. And I'm kind of always been interested in some of the process from a entrepreneurial standpoint, in terms of a little bit of your backstory. What does that look like in starting? I know you hire people that work for you, hiring some friends. Maybe talk us through that a little bit of what was the beginning like, growing more on the when it started to get really serious and you start to see that exponential growth, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so I went to school to be a youth pastor. That was my ambition as a teenager. So I have my degree in theology and youth ministry, working with, students, teenagers, high school kids, things like that. And it was in my third year of school where I kind of got enamored by just creative pursuits, whether it was video, social, web design, graphics, branding, and all that good stuff. And this was right as the internet was taking off for everyone. So, Facebook became publicly available 07, 08. And this was around the turn of the decade, so 2010-ish. And, we were just starting to see churches, use things like ProPresenter or actually have websites that were functional. And that really intrigued me. And I was looking around at the peers of mine at my school, the ones that would go on to be student pastors and pastors of smaller, more rural churches in Canada, ones that would go on to be worship pastors. And I could kind of foresee and predict that those were going to be the same people that were eventually put in charge, given the responsibility of, hey, can you post some stuff to our social pages? Hey, we need a website. Can you help us lock that down? And so as I was learning those skills and originally helping those close to me in geographical proximity, whether through contracts or just helping out friends, it became clear to me that, hey, this was something that was going to be a big need for churches in the coming decade and decades beyond. And so I started just blogging about what I was learning, basically teaching what I was learning. So I started our YouTube channel, Pro Church Tools, back then. I think that was 2012. And simultaneously, I was becoming very enamored with this idea of online business. And I was listening to podcasts about lifestyle design and, reading blog posts and taking online courses about like, hey, you can make money on the internet. And, call it delusion, call it confidence. But, I was like, what? I think I can do this. I'm going to give it a shot. And so that was the intersection of what I was giving to the world and what I was hoping to achieve. My wife at the time, we were just newly married. So first year of marriage, third year of Bible college for both of us. Or I was in Bible college. She was working full-time at an insurance company.
Yes.
And we were living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It's the most northern major metropolis on the continent. 8 months of winter. Bart knows intimately. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, those that are born there, they ride for their city, and I respect that. As imports, my wife and I, from southern Ontario, it was tough. And I just vividly remember the life being sucked out of my wife by this corporate job, 9 to 5, insurance broker, the culture there just toxic in every way because it is just not a fun, enjoyable way of earning, $30,000 a year. For us at that time, it kept us afloat. So I'm thankful and I'm grateful. But I was also ambitious to create something better for our family. And so that was the personal side of the ambition. So I start blogging, I start publishing these YouTube videos. Eventually, I introduce a productized service. And the idea was we would create video announcements for churches. So if you're unfamiliar with church, there's essentially 3 portions to almost every service. There's the music time, there's the talking time where the pastor's up there doing the preaching, and then there are the announcements, the not so glamorous element of the service, but necessary. Now, normally what you have is someone who goes up there and maybe they're reading from the paper bulletin or they're going off the dome and maybe then they welcome up another person. And it can get pretty convoluted. It can extend beyond what it should be. So there was this trend right around that time of taking your announcements and putting them into a 3-minute video. Yep. It meant that they wouldn't take up too much time in the service. And it was like, whoa, talking on video in a studio. This is amazing. Now, a lot of churches didn't really have the skills at that time, or even at that point, we didn't have democratization of videography. So you couldn't really just film with your phone at that time. You needed a DSLR or a camcorder. And at that point, a lot of churches didn't have that. So we were like, okay, you send us the script each week. I'll get on camera. I'll set up this collapsible green screen in my 1-bedroom apartment. And I'll, make it all spiffy with the graphics. I'll send it back to you. And then you can play that in your service. And it's a productized service. We do this for you every week. So you pay us, let's say, $299 a month. I think that was the around-ish opening price. And I was like, okay, Lord, okay, wife, okay, friends and family, my mom specifically. All I need is 4 churches to sign up for this. All I need is 4 of them. And it'll replace my meager church income, because at the time I was on staff at a local church plant as their media director, because again, that was my area of expertise. And I'll never forget, Bart, the first time I got an email. I was sitting in the church office, doing my work. It was 20 hours a week, and I was freelancing on the side, full-time in school, pretty busy, trying to get this business off the ground, Pro Church Tools. And I get an email, and it was from a church, and it was we have signed up for video announcements. It was the receipt email that my membership plugin automatically generates. Nice. And I was so excited. I was like, I made money on the internet. But within about 30 minutes, I get an email from this church specifically, individually now. And they go, oh, once we logged in, we realized this isn't exactly what we were hoping for. So can you refund us? And I broke down emotionally. I called my mom and I was crying. I was 21 in tears. And I was like, I can't.
Brutal.
It was there and then it was taken away from me. So a week later, a church from Jacksonville, Florida, signs up. Fort Caroline Baptist Church.
Come on.
They are still a user of our product. Not video announcements, I don't believe, but they are a Nucleus user of our software. Now, 7 years later, I don't know. That's a wide gap between 7 and 11 years. Many years later, they are still a customer of ours, and they were our very first church that ever signed up. And we did video announcements for them for years and years. And after that first church signed up, 2 or 3 more had. And that got to like the $1,200 a month range, which was what I was making at the church, which allowed me to say, okay, if I need to step back from church, we've replaced that income. And the next step from there was, okay, how do we replace my wife's income? Not only was she working at insurance, but also at Aldo at West Edmonton Mall in the evenings, that retail life, because we needed that 2 jobs.
Yeah.
Within about a year, that productized service was doing 6 figures, and wife had quit both jobs. Brittany had quit both jobs. She has a name. I don't have to keep calling her wife.
Shout out to Brittany.
And shouts to Britt. And I was still serving in the church, but no longer in a paid function, because I had to focus now on this growing business. And that was really like the first phase. That was phase 1 of the Pro Church Tools story.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in, man. Like, and it happened relatively quick. You hit 6 figures. You're able to tell your wife you don't need to keep doing these jobs that you're not necessarily passionate about. Nothing wrong with a retail job. Everyone does, food service, retail, that type of stuff. You, if I'm not mistaken, are born in the 90s. So it's like
91.
Yeah. So you kind of grew up with the hope or understanding, of what a digital platform could mean. And I feel like you were still might be on the cutting edge. A, being Canadian, B, being in a church in Canada, we're usually on the late side on a lot of things. And being able to grow with online, e-com type of digital product, that's very unique in your space to see somebody who's like, okay, I see where this is trending. I've identified very acutely a need that everybody is going to want is the production of video, because not everybody had the equipment, like you said. So you guys grow into this, I guess, first product, and then you subsequently, you've had multiple products. I know it gets down the road, some of these things get encompassed in Nucleus, but give us a little bit of a chronological advancement of what happens. I know there's an academy, and then there might be other things. I know Nucleus fits there in somewhere. You also have Rebel. So talk to us about how did you identify some of these core needs for your demographic of churches?
Sure. So once we kind of graduated from phase 1 of the Pro Church Tool story, the next phase was, okay, I was working too much. So that's when we started getting into bringing on team members. And I, as a 90s kid, like many of us, grew up on some really good sitcoms, whether it was Seinfeld,
the greatest show of all time,
to Friends, to The Office, to Community. I had this just, again, perhaps delusional view of life that you're just supposed to spend most of the time with your friends through your entire adulthood. And I was like, wait a minute, I had this really formative experience in youth group where for the first time ever, I was like, hey, a group of people who I feel like I fit in with. And then, wait, we all just go off our separate ways? Now, luckily, we all decided to move off to Edmonton together for whatever reason. Half the youth group, it seemed moved from Southern Ontario to Edmonton.
That's
we all
crazy.
went to the same school.
Wow.
And then I was like, oh, wait, so now we just get our jobs and we go our separate ways? So I was like, no, I'm just going to hire all my friends and I'll pay them to be my friends. And we'll just work and we'll make really fun stuff, but we'll just be all in the payroll. It's great. So the first person I ever hired was my first roommate in Bible college. His name's Mitch. We went to high school together. We moved across the country to Edmonton together. We lived together for the first 2 years. When I got married, I moved in with Britt, and Mitch, was not able to join us at that time. And
Sorry,
so
Mitch.
Mitch is kind of like, okay, I got school. What do I do next? And I was like, what, do you want to try working for me? And so it started as this part-time thing. He was doing this tiny element. And then, we got a garage in my first home and we set up shop there. And so Mitch and I had 2 little desks and we'd work together there. And then we hired another person from youth group, Jonas. So he was the second hire. And then we added Roxanne, who was a close friend of my wife and also from our youth group.
That's so funny.
So that was our third hire. And then we added Tristan and Brandon, and they were both from our youth group. And we just kept going and going and just kept hiring all of our friends. And every single one of them still works for us, except one, Brandon, who was like, hey, I want to try to make it my own entrepreneurial journey. And he started doing freelance video after working for us for several years. And so like he kind of like jumped into his own business thing, which we're really supportive of. And so we've never had any turnover, which is pretty remarkable. And everyone still works for us. That's the hiring side, which allowed me my ultimate pursuit in all of this. It was never the money. Like, we're a profitable business. We make more money than I ever could have dreamed of as a kid. The reason I started the business was freedom of time, right? Like, I didn't want my wife to have to go to this job, and I didn't want to have to like spend the majority of our waking hours doing these things we didn't want to. And again, like, I recognize the level of like privilege and audacity to even like want that kind of life. When you're a delusional kid, you're just like, I will do what I want, and I believe in myself. And then what happens is you get a level of success, and it becomes this like, belief cycle. Where like, well, I wanted that first thing, and it worked out. Like, why not this thing? Mm-hmm. Why not this thing? Why not this thing? And then it becomes this predictable, almost self-fulfilling cycle. So anyway, we're doing this productized service. It's really intensive. It doesn't scale. The more clients you bring on, the more work that needs to be done, the more people we need to hire. So it's like, okay, let's pivot to something that's maybe a bit more scalable. So we start selling information products. We open an academy, Pro Church Academy, we call it. It's $35 a month, and we release new courses all the time. So we launched that. 1,000 churches sign up in the first week. It's a big success. It doesn't bring in quite as much money as the productized service, but it can scale without us having to worry about hiring more. So that's great. What we come to learn about the information side of the business is that it has a lot higher turnover than the productized service. So we got it to that 1,000 churches. We got it close to 2,000, but that scale, while possible, became more difficult because it was really easy to cancel that service. It wasn't like, oh, you know what, once we have you doing video announcements, like it's years before we move on and either stop doing them or start doing them ourselves. It was really easy to be like, oh yeah, I don't really care about the course this month or for the next couple months, I'll just cancel. So we didn't have the lifetime revenue per user that really allowed us to scale fully how we wanted. And that was when we were like, okay, let's make the leap and pivot to the big guns, to software. The website builder for churches, the online giving platform for churches, the downloadable social media subscription service for churches, stock video for churches, and a people management database is what we're building now, and the next steps engine and all that's being brought into Nucleus. It's this all-in-one portal. The problem with software, of course, is that there's a huge barrier to entry. And so that's why a lot of companies will get investor capital, they'll bring in other partners, whatever it might be. At that time, we had a lot of money in the bank because we don't really have too many expenses.
Right.
We're paying myself and paying our friends, working out of a garage. No big deal. So we had about $1 million in the bank. We're like, okay, that should be enough seed money to take a shot at this idea of software, this platform we're going to call Nucleus. So we build the first version of that with an agency. We bring in these developers. We're paying them, and we launch this first version. Again, we have 1,000 churches sign up in the first week. It's amazing again. And now we have a platform that doesn't have the same turnover rate as the information business or information side of the business.
You're more involved in the ground level of what they need, right? They need that information.
Once you need a website and you're using us, there's not going to be a day where we don't need this website anymore.
Right.
You could switch to a different website provider, but you can't just cancel and be like, yeah, we don't need this anymore. Same with the online giving side of things. Of course, it's a much more expensive business. And we're hiring engineers now. We're working with product designers. And these people deservedly demand a much higher salary than we gave to ourselves when we first started, all of me and my friends and I. Mm-hmm. And so we're 5 years in now to the software game, 5 years into Nucleus. And it's been so fun and so rewarding and outrageously challenging. 5 years in, and I feel like, by the time we hit the end of that 5 years, not officially 5 years yet, kind of like the first full version of Nucleus will be realized. And we'll have gotten to that point without having to take any investor capital, without ever having to make decisions that we prefer not to, but because we have partners that are demanding us to, and they're the ones that are bankrolling everything. And I'm really glad to be there. But building software was by far much more difficult than the subscription business for information or even the productized service. But now we have this asset that just basically this beast that brings in cash, that has big margins once you've built a lot of the things.
Yeah.
And we also have the freedom to build what we want and create solutions for churches without anyone else calling the shots, which is really rewarding.
That's like the biggest thing, actually, is to be like, you did it your way and you don't have to answer to anybody. That's the ultimate, like, for lack of a better term, F you. Like, it's like, yo, there's no other way to quote unquote be a boss if you still have to answer to somebody. The one thing that I love talking with you, Brady, so much is the business acuity that like oozes out of you. And that's not necessarily something that comes from seminary or going to a Bible college. So I'm like, where did this come from? I can see already, especially more in your early years, your work ethic was like draped all over you. I could see that you were working really hard, probably studying, taking time to do research, listening to a lot of things, reading things. But where would you say your drive or acuity for business, just because you're a creative and just because you're a pastor does not mean that you could have built Pro Church tools? There has to have been another element of smartness to engineer these type of products, to understand the issues of having these type of services that you were offering that did not scale the way that they should, and how to map out those pathways to profitability and all that type of stuff. So where does that third element come from?
Well, I love being on podcasts like this, Bart, because I never get to talk about the business side of things, right? Like,
yeah,
that's one of the biggest difficulties when you get into, like, whether it's a side hustle when you first start or you want to do your own thing. People think a lot about, like, okay, what's going to be the product that I offer, or what's the skill that I have that the world needs? And that's important. So that's my, like, understanding of church communications. It's our software product. It's all of that. But then the other side is like, well, you also have to be a good business person. And those are two full-time jobs, whatever your level of expertise is in one thing, and then also running the business.
Yeah.
And so that quickly became a realization for me. And, I went to seminary. I have my degree. That's my formal training. But, like, I didn't learn anything about digital media there either. And so everything that I was learning, whether it be about social, web, videography, photography, like that, I'm just picking up, YouTube University. Mm-hmm. And the same was true for the business side of things, like taking those lifestyle business courses and trying to figure out, like, I have a very analytical mind. And so this is another part of the equation, like knowing yourself, your strengths and weaknesses. I have a very analytical mind. And so I approach digital from an analytical perspective, and I do the same for business. And so it became, spreadsheets and matrices, or matrices rather, and just numbers. And then it became executing on those numbers, which is just kind of like my natural skill set. And then again, it's this, I really believe in the, like, neuroplasticity of the human brain, like the fluidity of the individual. And it's especially good to learn that when you're young, when you are able to adjust more easily. And the older you get, I'm imagining it's the more difficult it becomes. You get older and you start feeling your muscles. They don't move the way they used to. They're more stiff. Right. And so is our brain. It's just like, it's not as fluid and as responsive as it once was. But I fully believe that, like, we have the capacity for much more than we believe about ourselves often. And again, it becomes this self-fulfilling cycle of belief. If you think that you're going to, like, not achieve something and then you don't achieve it, well, then that output becomes the next input. Well, last time I tried something, it didn't work. I'm the type of person it doesn't work for. And it becomes a spiral and spiral. And you never started at that low of a place. But after a number of, like, shortcomings, failures, you're like, you know what? This is just the type of person I am. And then you start to believe that about yourself. Well, the cycle works in the other way. And so I have to also, like, acknowledge that, being born in 91 and doing this when I did it in the industry that I did it, that's always 10 years behind. So I'm always able to look at like the real world and be like, oh, what are they doing? Okay, as long as I implement that within 10 years, we'll be ahead of the curve in the church world. Like, there's a huge luck side of the equation, timing.
That's
If
true.
I was born in '01 and did the exact same thing today, I don't think it would be as successful. I like got in at the right time, and I worked really hard, and I'm good at what I do. But there are three sides to this thing. It's hard work, it's intelligence, and it's luck of the draw. And I think that needs to be acknowledged also. But I think about that just cycle of like, fulfillment, that self-fulfilling cycle. It's like you believe something about yourself, and because of that belief or delusion, you're more likely to achieve it. And then when you think about something the next time, you're like, well, I achieved this thing, why not that? And just the two diverging paths that can go along. So
it's really
no
good,
great
man.
resolution there, but
No, it's all good. It's all good. A lot of people who achieve success, and you can define success in whichever way you want, usually have that confidence, for lack of a better term, like you said, delusional or whatever it may be. But you do have to kind of see it, and when you're leading a company, when you're leading people, you serve them by keeping your head in the game and knowing where the ship is pointed. I'd love to talk even a little bit more about your workplace culture. Like, you guys seem very casual. You have fun. You hired your friends. By conventional measures, that would be a big taboo. Don't do that. Don't go into business with your friends. It's never going to end well. And here you are. So it's kind of like, I'd love to know, what's your team management culture? How do you guys create the happy work-life balance? I think you live in the world, we both live in the world where people see our jobs as cool. You're entrepreneurial, you're doing your own thing, creative, you get to do things that other people don't necessarily get to do, and they see that as a glamorous type job because of the way it's perceived on social media. Talk to us a little bit about your workplace culture. How do you keep everyone balanced in terms of like workplace and home, and balance in terms of like team culture?
Well, once I had established for my own self this like freedom of time and financial stability, I wanted to then if I could, pass that on to like the people closest to me. And so our work culture is definitely unconventional, and I would certainly not say it's even replicable. It starts with healthy margins, and it starts with predictable income. One of the things that my accountants say to me every month is like, yeah, same thing. And I'm still kind of taken aback by that sometimes, because it's just what I'm used to. But one thing they'll say is like, yeah, like there's a lot of, businesses. It's like, oh yeah, a little up this month, a little down last month. And like, there's this volatility. But again, when I made that bet on software, one of the reasons was we wanted that predictable income to afford the work culture that we were pursuing. And so I work hard and smart to protect that runway so that we can do this for as long as we want to. But it starts with like those healthy margins and the industry we're in, and the fact that it's, a fully digital thing. So it allows for remote and hybrid work. Everyone is, at max 2 days at home, but usually most of them are 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. And then the work, we built an office space that we were like, hey, let's create an office space. Once we had the money, let's get out of this, dingy garage. We'll build an office space from scratch. And the idea will be that it like is a creative space that you want to come to, and it fuels creativity while you're there. But it's also like a collaborative place. Like you're there to just chat with your friends and hang out and share meals together. And so sometimes people will critique or ask from the outside, like, do people ever work? Because it can kind of look like that compared to maybe what they might be used to. And that is not a bug; it's a feature of what we are trying to establish and have established, and now again want to protect and give as much runway to as possible. And I would say that for virtually everyone in our company, like they're still my friend first and an employee second. So there's a lot of freedom and leeway given to folks. Like I've never had to have I don't know if I've ever had a tough conversation with anyone. Maybe one or two. I can't recall one at this moment. I'm sure there must have been one in like the 7 years we've all been there. But you basically just look at the results, like zero turnover, except for the person that wanted to start their own thing. And we were like, let's go. And we gave them a runway of a few months of salary where they could like do halftime before they felt like, okay, I now have my, feet under me or the ground under my feet. Let's go. And it's like, there's no turnover. And, everyone I believe is happy on a day to day. And we all hang out outside of work still, as much as we can.
Yeah, that's very rare.
You know what? I can't take credit for like so much of this because it's just the quality of people. Like I'm continually impressed by the quality of people in my life. And I also think from a philosophy or value side of things, one of my core beliefs in life is that longevity is so underrated in that like the relationships in my life now all span from my adolescence to I'm married with kids and a mortgage.
Yeah.
So even though it's only like 10 to 15 years, it's like half my life. And these people have been there since that time. So they were there through the fun parts when we got 1,000 churches signed up in like a week. And we had this huge product launch and it was more successful than we ever thought. And they were with me when we traveled across the world on our retreats or on our filming trips. And they were with me, at my mom's funeral when I'm like crying as she like goes into the ground. Because for the highest moments and the lowest moments, we're all there together for each other. And that there's no words to articulate how valuable that is, especially in a culture where many people feel lack of community. They feel loneliness.
Yep.
They feel, I go to a job and I make money to pay the rent, but like there's something missing beyond that. And at least for my part, I have never felt that because we have such a strong community around us. And we don't have this level of transience where people are like, yeah, I wish I could stay, but I have this job and it's in Midland. And I got to move 2.5 hours away and come see me. But then, life happens and you don't and you move on.
You articulated that really, really well. I was just a guest on someone's podcast and we were talking about the difference between a transactional or relational type work relationship, and I have 4 people who are on contract part-time with me, and taking care of them, I feel, is kind of my responsibility, that we have that proper workplace culture, that I care about you first as a person and then as the employee. And we were talking even about like, the dignity of work is kind of lost, where you used to work and feel good because you did work and it afforded you a life that you wanted, the life that you want. And now it's very like, hey, I'm just here for the check. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. Don't ask me about anything. And because I'm after that longevity in my own business, I'm trying to build these relationships with people who I feel add value to the company. And it's just very cool to see it at a later stage. Like what you have now has been the process, like you said, for almost 15 years. But if you want good work, you have to find good people. And if you have good people, then you should trust them and take care of them, and then get out of the way. Let them do the good work that you've hired them to do. And I just feel like there's a culture of, even in like the gig economy type thing, where I'm just here to do this one specific thing, and as soon as I'm done, peace out. I'll catch you on the flip side. And the more I'm getting my own perspective of how I'm going to operate and run a business, the more I see the relationships matter if you want to keep the quality level up. I love how you framed, that whole life journey that you're on with your group of friends. It is kind of like a TV show. This could turn into something on Netflix.
Thank you, Bart. That is my life goal. Thank you. My life is a sitcom. It's what I've always wanted. You saying that means everything.
Yeah, it could definitely be that. I would love to know a little bit about like what your day-to-day routines are. Like you said, you got plenty of margin with your time. Not to say that you don't work hard and that you don't work smart, but I wrote that down. Work hard and smart to protect that runway. That's that's the goal. I want to do the things that I'm most passionate about and execute at a high level, so that I can protect the things that I care the most about, which is, for me, my family, spending time with my own mother who's aging, being able to travel, being able to do the things that I care about, because that's the only non-renewable resource we got is time. Money, you could always make more money. I could work harder and smarter and make more money, but that always is going to be there. But time, that's finite. I'd love to know a little bit about your routine. How do you protect those margins for yourself?
Yeah, I'm a very structured person. My free time is generally structured. There are also different seasons to this, right? So when I was first starting, it was nose to the grindstone, extreme hours of work. And everything's a trade-off. So you do that, and then your physical health suffers, your mental health suffers, spiritual health, relational health suffers. It's a trade-off. And, I mentioned my mom passing. That was 3 years ago. She was my best friend and my biggest mentor. And one of the things that she always said to me was, she's like, you're not always going to have this level of motivation and this like youthful vigor to like just go out and get something. And she's like, work hard now. Like, I see how hard you're working. Keep it up. Because one day, something's going to hit and you're going to be like, I think I kind of just want to crack a beer and watch the game today. And she's like, that's a good thing too. That's a good season too. So don't then regret it when you get there. So with that in mind, everything came about like, all right, I'm going to establish something in our business. We're going to then build a system around that. And then I'm going to hand it off. And I can't even recall who I was speaking to yesterday. I don't even know what. Usually I have a good memory. They were like, how do you know so much about so many things? And I was like, well, usually there are just like seasons where I do a sprint and I figure out everything I need to know about this one thing. I then create a system to allow for that one thing to be sustainable in my life. It then becomes a concrete addition to my life and I move on. Yeah. And if you keep doing that over and over again, individually, you'll seem a lot smarter than you actually are over 10 years. And in your business, your systems and what you're able to output volume-wise will be much greater than it was 10 years prior. I have this quote written on my wall because I turned 30 this year. So I have a new decade ahead of me, and it says most people...
Congratulations.
Oh, I appreciate it. The quote says most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I used to have these like big yearly goals, and we never quite hit them. And I was like, I need to like expand my scope on this. And like my vantage point, like how far I'm looking in the future. And so now we keep thinking about like, well, what are we trying to accomplish over the next decade? And on the one hand, it kind of gives us less urgency and less pressure to like fast track something that you have to earn over a longer period of time. And it also allows us to dream a bit bigger. And now as for my like daily routines, I wake up after 8 or at 8 on most days. I average more than 8 hours of sleep a night. I do my creative work first thing, so I'll have a coffee, and I will do my writing, my creative work, 8 till 10. 10 till 1 is exercise, walk the dog, lift some weights, go on a longer walk, mobility work, meditation, lunch at 1, and then afternoon is meetings into the office. And then the rest is basically, free time. Like I never, ever work past 4 o'clock, basically.
Nice.
And then I make space for like the recreational things that I enjoy, the things that can help turn my mind off, but are also so like I love basketball, football and baseball. I like very much. I love TV and movies. I love eating good food, drinking good drink, being with my friends. And so I make lots of time for those things as well. And then there's the familial side. One of my, again, big goals was like, I just want my wife and I to be home all the time for our kid. And I don't want my daughter to watch us. I have a daughter, she's 6. I don't want her to like rarely see her dad. My dad was home a lot because he was a firefighter, 25 years in the city. And so he would do 24-hour shifts, like 8 days a month. And then he was home like 24 other days of the month. And so I kind of was like, oh, and mom didn't work. Mom stayed at home. So it's like, oh, I love having all the parents at home all the time, except for when dad had to do his 24-hour shifts, which like were so long and they counted overnight that like they seemed like way less.
Yeah.
And so that also became a big goal of ours. And so that's a bit about routine structure.
Yeah, man, that's really, really good. You touched on something, like you said a bunch of stuff, but the one thing that stood out to me, because I'm going through this process now where the more I get involved in any type of marketing or, development of the business, the more I'm realizing the ultimate tool is the pen. It used to be the pen tool, in Illustrator or Photoshop. I don't know if you can separate writing and good writing from being anyone who does anything digitally or marketing at all. Even social media, you got to have a really good caption as well that talks about what you're trying to say. How did you hone in on the writing skill? I often, you get me probably like number one and number two, where I see an email from you come in and I click it right away thinking, why is Brady messaging me? And then I read about, oh, this is a regular email to everybody, because the writing gets you every time. The subject line or the pretext gets you every single time, where it's like, it's very natural. It speaks very clearly. But again, it's one of those things where if you don't know that, if you, from the outside looking in on anyone who does like social media or does any marketing or brand development, it just looks like all cool, fun pictures, nice, fun colors, all that kind of stuff. But the real essence to any core message is going to be the tone, the writing, what that voice is going to be sounding like. Where did that addition come into play for you guys?
Yeah, it's funny we haven't even talked about this yet, because the true catalyst behind everything I've ever done has been the influence we have in our industry. Like you don't just launch a software product and get 1,000 churches to sign up in the first week without like funding or some crazy like partnership. Like that happened because our email list and our social platforms are big for our industry, and I have specifically, because I'm the public face on our company, considerable influence, because since the first day of our business, we were like, okay, the most important thing is to build an email list and to create content that people enjoy, give it away for free, build trust with those people and our audience, and eventually some of them will buy the things we sell because they trust us. And that has been the singular biggest focus of everything we do, even now with our software platform. So again, I mean, getting to it now, 45 minutes into the podcast is probably an oversight on my part. When I say writing, I write my social posts. I write the scripts for my videos on our YouTube channel word for word. I write our TikTok and short form videos, and then I obviously write our blog posts and our email. So writing to me is like, that's just how all the content begins. And because I'm analytical, because I'm so structured, like I do like to take great care in every single word that I choose. Our podcast would be the only thing that's a little bit more free-flowing, and it's important for us to have that content medium because everything else is so scripted that it's good to have the more free-form stuff so I don't always sound like a robot. As for how to develop that skill, I've written 1,000 blog posts and 1,000 social posts conservatively over 10 years. And so you just do that. It's like anything, getting to the gym. I struggled with my deadlift form for so long. And I would read about it, and I'd watch YouTube videos on how to do it. But the deadlift is a complex exercise because a lot of it has to do with the specific length of your legs versus your torso versus your arms. So if you watch someone else's setup, let's say, and they're like, put your knees here and your legs here. I'm like, well, when my knees go there and my legs go there, it hurts. Well, because, your arms are shorter than mine, or my legs are shorter than yours. And you can really only learn it if you get down there and you just try it again and again and again. And you watch for the input that your body's giving you. You're like, okay, this feels like that when I do that. That seems bad, but this feels good. Okay, adjust. And I was doing some draft work for a YouTube video that we're going to publish in the next couple of months. And like the working title is like what I never wanted to tell you about social media. And the thesis behind that video is that I can teach and lay out my best strategies for social, for writing, for digital. And I can give you, to use an analogy, the scales for music. Like, here are the rules. Here's what like works good as a foundation. But social and digital and writing and building an audience it's like jazz. It's reacting, it's putting out something and then getting back something and adjusting. Let's use a different analogy. We'll use sports. It's baseball season, September when we're recording this. It's the pitcher versus the batter.
Yes.
It's not like me on the free throw line shooting a basket where the basket never moves. And so I can just focus on what I'm doing. It's pitcher and hitter. I'm throwing this. They're expecting me to throw that. I need to know they're expecting that, so that I need to adjust slightly. And then once I've adjusted, they're going to adjust again, and I need to adjust again. And that is everything about digital. It's moving so quickly. It's evolving so fast. You can understand some of the rules, but you can only ever get really good at it if you're doing it again and again and again. Because even if you become good at it, if you then stop, in 12 months you won't be good at it because so much will have changed. And so there's no easy answer there except like do it and write and publish. And just remember that no one knows what they're doing, and everyone starts at the same place. You know, you read my first content, watch my first video, go to my YouTube channel, sort by oldest to newest, and watch the first one. Like, my presence is not nearly as good as it is now on video. For some reason, I keep looking up like this. For those listening, I got my chin to the sky. I don't know why. I'm looking at this camera, and I'm feeling
confidence.
The need to be like, okay, show them your neck. They want to see your Adam's apple.
All of it.
What is that? I don't know. Everyone does that, and so you got to just do the work. There's no really easy solution. And
no
finding your
substitution
voice
for the work. Yeah. That's really, really good. In passing there, you dropped another flex on us. You said a few months out. And I was like, wait, you're writing content for a few months from now. And I understand, people pre-plan and try to get as much of a calendar together of what you want to say. But at the same time, when things happen so fast, like we're talking about, you still have like a thread that we have these themes, these ideas that we're trying to put together, but at the same time, we can react to things and we can comply to other things to provide assistance to the audience to actually help them through what's happening currently. And that's just so amazing because most people who, again, in your niche, I don't know if they're doing that degree of preparation and planning with an email list of yours 5. And I think that's a huge testament to how analytical, like you said, your mind is, right? Like it's more like you're thinking going through the motions, thinking of this really as a business, where I think a lot of people might get bogged down with the content of the business and who the audience is. And so they may get slowed down. Whereas you're trying to keep it so laser focused on, okay, if this is a content marketing business or if we're a software company, how exactly are we going to keep putting one foot in front of the other? I hope all the listeners are catching all this stuff. I myself have about a page and a half worth of notes just talking with you, Brady. I'm super thankful that you've taken the time to talk. It's always great catching up with you, man. Let people know where they can find you. Tell them about Nucleus and where they can find that.
Yeah, if you may not be the target audience to be a user of our platform, but if you want to see how we do our marketing pages and what Nucleus is all about, it's nucleus.church. That's the simple URL, nucleus.church. And then it's just my name on all the social platforms, at Brady Shearer. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can see the content that we do there and connect. If you do want to connect with me personally, the DMs of Instagram are your best bet. Again, at Brady Shearer on Instagram, just shoot me a message and I'll do my best to get back to you.
Sweet, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Yes, sir.